So hi everyone and welcome to this spotlight session at Shine Connect. This is part of a series of sessions we're running this year where we really get to know some Shine members and their stories in a bit more depth than you might otherwise hear. So I'm really pleased that we've got Ben here today to talk to us about his experiences. Just to let you know again that the session is being recorded so that it can be watched back on the site. So we are pinned so that it won't catch any of the participants, but the recording is in progress to let you know. I think I'm just going to hand over to Ben because he's the main man of the hour. But thank you so much for coming along, Ben.
Thanks, Claire. Hi, everyone. I'm Ben, and I've been invited by Shine to talk today, which I'm very proud and pleased to be able to share my story with you all, and hopefully you can take some things from that to help you in your journey. And certainly, if you've got any questions at the end, by all means, please raise your hand or place them in the chat, and we can or I can answer them, and we can talk about that. But yeah, I am 44 years old, and probably tell from my accent, I am an Australian, and I have been living over here in London for the last 15 years, almost 16 years now. But I thought I'd just give you a little bit of background in terms of my early life growing up, and then how I had health issues later on in life, and that's sort of, we can talk from there really around the issues that has caused me and how I'm dealing with them really. So I grew up in Australia, in a city called Brisbane, and that's on the east coast of Australia. It's north of Sydney, and my upbringing was pretty normal, you could say. I was lucky enough to get a good education. I was very active, very healthy. I had 3 brothers, played a lot of sport, spent a lot of time at the beach, which I'll come on to a bit later on. But yeah, it was a good childhood, and certainly lucky to get a good schooling and go on to university. And I became a town planner, and that it's in the development sector. So I worked mostly in planning consultancies, worked a little bit for local government, and that was in Brisbane. And I also worked up on the Sunshine Coast, the North Coast, which is an hour-and-a-half drive north of Brisbane. And that lasted, I think I was working professionally through most of my 20s. I travelled a little bit over to Europe and around Australia in that time, but again kept a pretty healthy lifestyle whilst I started my employment full time. So I exercised a lot. I did a lot of running, did a lot of swimming, competed in triathlons and things like that. So had a reasonably good diet as well, nutritionally, with my food and that. So really no real health issues for me through my 20s and early 30s. And it was in my late 20s that I moved over to London to work and travel. Traveling was a big passion of mine. So I thought, what a great opportunity to be able to get a working holiday visa in London. I had a lot of friends living over here at the time. And so I moved over here, and it was like moving to Ramsay Street in Neighbours. There was a lot of friends here, and we had a great time. I was able to meet new people, travel lots more with Europe on the doorstep. And it was a good time, really. Work was really hard and quite stressful, but manageable. And I sort of had a bit of a work hard, play hard attitude, which was fine. And then when I was 36 years old, 2013, I got a few moles on my back and my stomach and things, and they have always been, growing up in Australia particularly, with the high UV levels down there. It's always been a very people are very conscious, I suppose, of wearing sunscreen hats, that sort of thing. And I grew up in an environment that was the UV was incredibly high, and going to the beach and things like that was always, you have to be very careful because you could get sunburnt very quickly. But I did have a very outdoor lifestyle when I was younger, surfing and going to the beach and playing sport. And because of my moles, I had them checked occasionally, and certainly I was aware of the importance of any changes to moles or any sort of abnormal sort of conditions. So there was one mole on my back, which was a little bit, it looked a little bit suspect. So back in 2013, I had a specialist over here check it, and they said, "Oh, it looks fine, but we'll chop it out just to be safe." And luckily for me, they did chop it out, but it was a melanoma, and that's pretty much considered one of the most serious types of skin cancers. And at that stage, I was like, "Whoa, okay, what does this mean? What has it spread?" I had no idea in terms of what the actual implications were if you had such a skin cancer. And so for the next 2 to 3 weeks, I was I had an operation on my back to remove a wider area of my skin around where the mole was. And I had a few consultations and waiting for test results to come back, scans to be had. I had an MRI scan where they injected dye into me to check my other nodes. And at the time, going into an MRI scanner was a new thing for me, and very, very overwhelming and very stressful. But after about 3.5, 4 weeks, I got the news that it hadn't spread and that I was okay. And at the time I was like, amazing, so relieved, so pleased that everything would be okay. Life sort of went back to normal almost immediately. I had this huge scar on my back to remind me of it. But I also had regular checkups at the hospital. So for the first 3 months, I think it was even the first few months, every month I would go back for a physical check. And then that moved into a 3-month cycle and then a 6-month cycle. And so I was getting these physical checks. There was occasionally as another scan, or I had a couple of other moles removed to make sure that they weren't cancerous, and they were fine. But again, all those symptoms and feelings and anxieties would rise up to the surface again as part of that process. And I didn't do anything about it. I just sort of was aware of it, and worried, but then relying on these specialists, these doctors, these nurses to help me get through that. And then in the summer of 2017, so I was 39 years of age at this stage, I was having my routine 6-monthly checkup for the previous melanoma diagnosis. I reported to the doctor at the time that I'd noticed a lump in my neck. And they didn't say anything at the time. They just said, "Oh, okay, that's interesting." And then they felt my glands in my armpits and groin and my neck and said, "Oh, we should probably just get that checked to see what that means." Of course, because they didn't tell me anything, I was very, very worried all of a sudden. And I didn't know whether that was related to the melanoma. Was this something new? Was this, what was it? And I didn't get on Google. I didn't sort of overly want to worry already what was. I suppose I was incredibly worried, but I didn't want to sort of exacerbate that by going online and looking at stuff. So I waited to get results from, I had a CT scan, an MRI scan, and then I think it was about a week and a half, 2 weeks after they identified this lump that they called me into the hospital and told me that I had what was follicular lymphoma. And that is follicular lymphoma. It's a blood cancer. It's the most common type of low-grade non-Hodgkin lymphoma. So again, my world just sort of, I thought, goodness, I'm 39 years old, and I've now already got 2 different types of cancer. I thought, what are the odds of that? What does this mean? Is my life over? Yeah, all the thoughts that people think of were coming to my mind, and certainly the stresses of that were really scary. And so I thought, right, okay, well, obviously I've been diagnosed with this. What are we going to do about it? What can I do? I'm a person of action. I like to sort of, when there is a problem, try and solve it and try and address it. And the doctors at the time said, well, we're putting you on what we call a watch and wait program, which is also recognized as active monitoring, active surveillance, or watchful waiting. And I had someone say at the time that it was more like a watch and worry, a worry and wait program. So because of the stage that the blood cancer was at, they didn't think that any sort of treatment was necessary. They would wait until it sort of became a more serious, of a more serious nature. So I think I was at about a stage 2. But over that next 6 months of just monitoring, I did start to experience some discomfort in my abdomen region where the lymphoma was spreading. And so they made a decision just before my 40th birthday that I should undergo some chemotherapy. And I had a choice, actually. They said you can undergo chemotherapy or you can take some medication. And I was at the view that, well, I asked the question, what would you do, doctors? What do you think? And they thought that the chemotherapy would be the strongest way of dealing with this and helping me. So I was like, great, let's do it. Let's go for it. So again, my head was spinning that I had to undergo chemotherapy at my age, with no real history of cancer in my family. But I thought, it's something I need to do. Let's focus on that, focus on what needs to be done. So I went in for 18 weeks of chemotherapy, which was what they call R-CHOP, which is 5 different drugs that I take in hospital, and that had all the side effects that you would associate with chemotherapy. So I lost my hair. I was quite moody. Appetite was up and down. But what I tried to do during that time was I tried to just sort of maintain best I could a normal lifestyle. So I kept going to work. I would only miss work really when I had to go to hospital for my therapy, and that helped. That sort of got me through that period of the physical challenges that the chemotherapy brought about. And after 18 weeks, the results were coming back that they were able to suppress the lymphoma considerably, and that I was in a state of what they were calling remission. So they felt that there had been a success, and that they had suppressed it sufficiently to allow me to sort of live my life. What the frustration is that follicular lymphoma is a chronic illness, so they can't eradicate it completely. So I was sort of cured, but sort of not, in a way. But I was able to then carry on with living with this sort of dark cloud hanging over me almost of what's the future hold, whilst they've been able to treat it and work with me. At this point in time, I was still always conscious. Not a day went past almost where I was thinking about what if this happens? What if that happens? How does this affect my relationship, my work, everything really? But what was helpful at the time was the physical checkups. So again, I went into a program of monthly checks where I'd go to the hospital and I would have my bloods checked, and they'd do a physical check on me, and I'd have a consultation as part of that with the specialist at Guy's Hospital at London Bridge, which is quite close to where we live, which is quite comforting. But I never did anything at that point around my mental health. never really crossed my mind. I'd had conversations with my clinical nurse and her team and the consultants that there was things available to me, but I felt that I was okay because I was getting these physical checks, and I'd go in for my physical check. The blood seemed fine, Ben. There's no lumps and bumps. You're okay. And off I'd go and carry on with life. And that then was really sort of how my life was for a number of years. And I seemed to be able to keep the fear and the anxiety at a reasonably low level, but it was always there and always something that I never really sort of addressed. As part of that, and what caused that to become an issue was the pandemic. And I began the pandemic, like many people, in lockdown, obviously, with working from home and losing that busyness in life that had kept me from thinking too much about my illness. And with lockdown and working from home, I had a bit more time on my hands. And with more time on my hands, I had more time to think and worry about the what ifs. And as part of that, again, because I didn't have at the time tools or ways to deal with these anxieties and these fears, I started to drink alcohol more than I should have. And the alcohol became my coping mechanism for that worry. And with the stresses of work, the stresses of life, and then the stresses of this health issue that I seemed to constantly be worrying about, I tended to drink alcohol to escape that reality. I was really sort of at the time thinking I was coping with it by drinking, when really I was checking out, and the issues would all still be there when I would come back from drinking. So during the pandemic, during COVID, I realized that this was becoming a problem. People around me realized it was becoming a problem. I decided to get therapy, try and get some help. And my doctors, consultant and my nurse at the hospital provided me with some contact details. And I also reached out to Shine. And that's when I undertook the Shine Breakup program, registered for that, and met a number of fantastic people who also were experiencing different stages of different cancers. And we worked a program over a number of weeks with facilitators from Shine, and it was fantastic. It was really good. And it was the first time I had actually done any sort of group therapy work. Really enjoyed it, really bonded with the people that were on the call, and we're still on a WhatsApp group now. We still talk to each other. Some of them were aware of today, actually, and wished me well, which was really nice. And it was during that I thought, I felt this is enough. This is dealing with my worries and my issues, but it actually wasn't. I did need more help. And at the time, I didn't think I did, but my drinking didn't really slow down or stop. And so I continued to pursue medical therapy support through psychiatrists, through psychologists, through psychotherapists. And it really was a bit of a trial and error. I went through the NHS in the first instance, and the availability of seeing someone was challenging. And luckily I have private cover through work, so I was able to tap into that. And I was able to eventually find someone who I felt I could open up more to. And I got to a point really where I had been, my drinking was really out of control. You could say it was unmanageable. My life was becoming unmanageable as a result of that. And I had to basically be honest with myself, be honest with my therapist. I was told him everything. I reached out to Alcoholics Anonymous at the time as well, to seek help from them, the program and fellowship that is. And through that step that I made, that I realized I had to do that to address this, I was able to stop my drinking, start looking at the reasons why I had been, become, or why I was drinking so much, and understand those issues and start to unpack that and realize what my thoughts and feelings were that were resulting in this behavior. I also, through my therapist, was able to, and through my employer, who was very, very supportive, I was able to take some time off work, and I was able to undergo a day program at a hospital where they do psychiatric sort of work with people dealing with all sorts of things in life, not just health issues. But it was a very, and this was only 4 months ago, really. It was a very special time for me because I was able to learn so much more about myself. And I learned more in that period of time than I had for a very long time over my life. And it was all centered around mental health. I was able to learn more about mindfulness, awareness, cognitive behavioral therapy. I was able to deal with my anger management, and I was able to start to realize and identify when I was becoming anxious or when I was stressed with something. Just take a step back and understand or try to understand what the reasons were, and then look at those reasons rather than, I'm really stressed, this is all too much, I'll have a drink to forget about things. So through the therapy program, I was able to start dealing with those issues, and through the support of AA as well, I was able to tackle the drinking problem, which it was. And I I accepted that. I'm happy to say that through through the AA program, I haven't had a drink since, and it's 110 days today. But that's a journey, and that's something I'll continue to work on, because I know that doesn't help me with my mental health. So I don't touch that, and certainly don't plan to. But the therapy work is great, because it was great, and it's something I keep going back to now, because they've taught me some tools to be able to identify when those issues are starting to arise. And middle-aged man, I didn't really communicate much with my anxieties, my stresses. I wasn't a good communicator with my partner. I wasn't a good communicator with friends or family. I always seemed to just bottle things up, and that really was a pressure cooker, and would result in issues of resentment, issues of anger, issues of stress, fear, anxiety, and that would all just sort of bubble away, really, and it would then explode with me using the wrong tools to address the real concern. So I've, over the last few months, really, it was like a light bulb moment, you could say, where I just realized that this is such an important part of my recovery. And whilst I thought I was dealing with my recovery through physical treatment, through physical checks and support at the hospital and through the consultants and doctors, the physical side of it is like this. The mental is from then to the rest of my life sort of thing. That's never going away. And I have discovered and I have now such an appreciation and respect for how important mental health is. It's something, and meditation, for example, something that I had never really understood, but something that, again, I have embraced to deal with and to just help with my mindfulness. My AA meetings I have in the mornings on a Zoom call, and that is part of my therapy, and it helps me check in with myself each day before I start my day. And again, that's very helpful for wider issues in my life. Nothing's changed since I went into remission with my health back in 2018 when I finished my chemotherapy. I haven't had any relapses. I haven't had any reason to be more worried than coming out of the hospital after my last chemotherapy treatment. But during all of that period of time, I was dwelling on the what ifs. I was dwelling on fears and anxieties that I didn't address. And as a result of that, and the result of the pandemic and not having those tools in place, I just spiraled and spiraled down and down and down. And I feel very lucky today to have been able to take the step to identify that I had a real problem in dealing with these issues, and that the cause of and the alcohol was fueling that. And lucky that I was able to reach out to support group such as AA for my alcohol, but also be able to get to see a psychiatrist and a psychotherapist who I was able to be very honest with, and they were able to help me then when I was honest with them, which was really is an important stage in this. So I wanted to share my story today with you to hopefully help others out there that may not be talking, communicating, sharing with others their fears and their anxieties. When I did my therapy work at the hospital, it was group therapy. Again, I'd never really done any group therapy, and it was amazing. It was so good because I found the more I put in, the more I got out, and the more I contributed and engaged with others, the better I felt in myself. I was able to learn more and apply more around the techniques and ways to address and tackle those big worries in life. And I'm using those tools now in other things, not just around my health, but also around my stresses with work or my stresses in my relationship or other things that we have to deal with. So I think that's probably where I might finish, Claire, if that's okay. And I'm more than happy to answer some questions and help out if I can.
Thank you so much, Ben. I was transfixed. I could have listened to you for hours. It was so great to hear. Thank you so much. And I think it's so important, isn't it, to highlight when we're going through treatment, when we're diagnosed, that a lot of the focus is on the physical. Like, it's just that rigmarole of tests and appointments and physical checks. And very rarely, I mean, I don't know your experience, but in my experience, very rarely do they sort of check in with you and be like, how are you doing amongst all this? Like, what's going on up here? What are you thinking? What are you feeling? And I wondered your experience of that, in terms of how much did the medical teams actually ask you about your coping strategies and things like that?
Yeah, good question. They touch on it. I mean, what's interesting is through this journey, when I was going through the physical treatment and then my checkups, they would ask the question, "How are you?" And I would say fine. I would say fine or good, those two words. And they're busy. They don't have time to start trying to unpack that. They would just say, okay, you seem okay. I was given literature. I was given contacts if I needed to speak to anyone, but I felt I didn't. When I did my group therapy, the therapists at the hospital were like, when we would check in at the start of a session, they wouldn't allow us to use the word fine, or they wouldn't allow us to use the word good. We actually had to tell them how we felt. And it took me a little while to learn how to express that and explain that to them and to the group. But I started to learn, and then I now can sort of tell someone how I'm actually feeling. And, I think that there's some great literature out there. There's some great organizations and groups and things that can help. But until it's really hard to say, really, or explain. It's until you actually sort of have been through this and identify that the mental health aspect is so important. It's difficult sometimes for some people, I think, to be able to latch onto that and to use that and to understand it. Understanding it, I think, is probably good word.
Absolutely. I used to just sometimes wish that they'd have like an X-ray machine for my emotions. So I'd be like, I can't possibly put into words what I'm feeling. That feels impossible. So, that people would just be able to look in and go, oh, you could do with some help in this area or this, and I'll send you here or there. And it really is about, it's finding the spaces in which you can learn to become a bit emotionally eloquent as well, I guess, like testing that out with people, but it feels really scary at first, doesn't it?
It does, yeah.
I've got some questions actually in the chat for you, if you don't mind.
Yeah, cool, great.
So one question is, it says, hi Ben, given the different stages of cancer, did you ever have a real fear of, you know what, and how did you cope in those moments? I mean, I guess, you know what could be interpreted, but I'm assuming we're sort of talking about the real big fears there.
Yeah, definitely. I had that feeling initially when I had my skin cancer diagnosis, but when I got diagnosed with follicular lymphoma, like a blood cancer, I was just, okay, my time's up. Well, I'm 39, at least I've had 39 good years, sort of thing. I was really sort of just at the tip of the iceberg in terms of the fear of my life ending. But yeah, you know, I really sort of I drew on the energy of the medical team. I sort of really they were fantastic. They are amazing people. I have absolutely so much time and respect for the staff that worked with me at the NHS and still do to this day. And I've been lucky enough to have a clinical nurse and one of the consultants there who've been there from the beginning with my treatment. But their energy and their positive attitude, I drew on that, tried to use that as part of that coping mechanism. But I didn't have the tools. I didn't have ways to express my worry. I bottled that up inside. I turned to drinking alcohol to try and numb the pain, self-medicate. That really was, really not healthy for mind and body. So certainly it was, there were some moments where it was really quite stressful.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the reality is it's kind of, there are lots of different strategies depending at what kind of space you're in. And like, if it's those moments of absolute fear, which I'm sure everyone on this call relates to, that like you can't do much else other than just feel, is that sort of just bringing it back into the moment, isn't it? Like, I'm here now, I'm safe, I can feel my feet on the ground, like really just that kind of mindful in this minute, I'm okay, just to kind of get through that time. And then all the other strategies that are there for at different times, sort of reaching out might feel possible at certain times and not others, or meditating might feel, and it's like having that toolbox, isn't it? And knowing what works for you and when, I think, is the real key. You've sort of brilliantly described all those different things you do. Another question is, says, hi Ben, thank you, a really important talk. Thank you for sharing. How did your male mates handle things, talking about things with you? Did they support you how you needed them to? It says here, there is a session for men tonight, so a men's group talking about cancer.
Yeah.
And John says he knows it's always been strange to him how friends can react sometimes.
Yeah, good question, John. Definitely. I was quite reluctant to share a lot of information with my male friends and my female friends. I just felt that I can handle it. I can manage this on my own. And, early on, 6 years ago, I wouldn't really share much. But now, particularly talking to my close male friends about how bad things got, me, how the alcohol was an issue, how I needed to get therapy, I needed to take time off work. My male friends have been amazing. They've all sort of been very supportive, that it's had enabled us to have wider conversations, that, things that are going on in their lives that we talk about, and we share things around that. So it's been quite extraordinary how you just assume that you don't really need to talk about it with your mates, but actually, the more you talk about it, the more you realize, well, actually, this is great. And I'm finding I'm getting, I've reached out and I'm helping a few other people, for example, in the Shine program. And when I've sort of taken that step to offer a phone number or offer a cup of coffee or a conversation with someone, they feel good that they can share. But I'm feeling quite good in myself that I'm able to somehow contribute and help to their experience as well. But yeah, no, it definitely now with my male friends, they're certainly talking more. And I think that by me having gone through what I've been through, it makes their conversations with me a little bit easier as well. So yeah, thanks, John.
Yeah, absolutely. It's almost like you need someone. It's like you've got a circle of people. You just need someone to break the mold and actually start talking about feelings. It sort of has a domino effect sometimes, which is a lovely thing. So another question here and a comment saying masterful storytelling. Thank you for sharing. This is the comment. Question is, how do you manage being far away from family and friends in Australia? Says, by the way, I'm British but live in France and had all her treatment in France. So something.
Yeah, very challenging, really challenging when you have to tell the news to a family member that you're not well and you're on the other side of the world, and their immediate reactions are, come home to get treatment, or we'll come over to you. And it didn't come to that, but certainly I think Zoom and MS Teams and Skype and things have really helped. And I'm talking more now with my parents, for example, who I've shared recent struggles with, and my brothers and close friends. Communication is so important. So text messages, Zoom calls, anything I can do to keep that dialogue going has helped. I was lucky enough to be able to get back to Australia this Easter, just gone, and it had been over 3 years since I'd been home because of the pandemic. So that was really nice to be able to be home with family and other friends back in Australia. But yeah, the Zoom, even I was FaceTiming when I was in the chair getting my chemotherapy to family at home, just because you can. So, and you've got time when you're sitting in a chair for a whole day. With the machines pumping away. So yeah, no, it was that really helped. Without that technology, goodness, I don't know how. It must be so much harder, but certainly that helps.
Yeah, I think it's like kind of normalizing the experience a bit for those people as well, isn't it? Seeing you in the hospital and seeing that you're sort of broadly all right, and you can still talk.
Yeah,
and
exactly. Yeah, it's a good point.
Helps diffuse that fear for them a little bit as well, maybe. So we've got another question. What other tips and strategies did you use to manage your mental health, especially if you have feelings of overwhelm?
Yeah, I'm still working on all of these tools. I think that my awareness is the biggest one. So now when I feel resentful or angry or grumpy or frustrated, or I'm feeling anxious, I try to sort of almost take a step back and try and understand what's causing that. What's sort of why am I feeling like this? And it's what are the thoughts and what are the feelings that then will result in that behavior changing or becoming. So I'm more aware of myself, I think is I'm answering this in the right way, but because I'm once upon a time, I would have just been working and stressful and with my health and just going 100 miles an hour and not sort of being in the moment and understanding the moment. Now I can try, and when I feel that or understand, or when I'm aware of that thing that's happening, I can try and sort of just stop and sort of think, well, okay, what's causing this, or why is this affecting me? Sometimes I'm not quite sure, so I have to sort of think to myself, well, can I park it? Can I sort of come back to it? Or if I can address it there and then, I'll try and work it through. And it might be a conversation with my partner if it's been something that had sparked or triggered some issues there, for example. So yeah, awareness is so important.
Yeah, it's a really good point, isn't it? Because I think until you can we can act on we just keep going on automatic and not really pausing and giving ourselves space to think about, actually, I'm feeling this and then I'm doing this. And is the doing thing actually helping the feeling thing, or is it making it worse? And sometimes all sorts of different behaviors can sort of be a distraction, or actually can heighten the feeling and that we're trying to sort of process or suppress in some way. So that awareness thing, and we'll talk a little bit at the end about some places that you might go to get a bit of support with finding that space to talk about these things. and find ways of coping. I was just wanted to quickly ask you, because I know when we talk about counselling a lot and therapy, some people say, you know, I've been to therapy and it didn't work. We didn't get on, nothing happened. They just sat there quietly and I didn't say anything and it was awkward. I've heard that a lot about counselling. I just wanted to check in with you. Was your sort of first counselling session great? Did it like immediately click and go brilliantly? How was it?
It was horrible. It was really, I mean, yeah, I was looking for the answers. I was like, sort of, didn't quite know what I would be going through, but I was looking for answers, quick solutions, and I was frustrated, and I was quite defensive in my my approach, you could say, to therapy, and that was a trial and error. So there was 2 or 3 psychiatrists and a psychologist, and I would start and I'd have 2 or 3 sessions over a 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 week period, and nothing was changing. And I would be frustrated and I'd be coming back to a meeting and saying, oh, I'm not feeling any different. I don't know what I'm doing wrong. And it wasn't really until I wasn't honest, I don't think, with all of them as well. And it wasn't until I actually took that step to say, look, I'm not being honest with you. I need to explain what's really going on. And I explained that, you know, my drinking was out of control and I was, you know, using it to deal with all these issues, and I need to do something about this. That the psychiatrist I was seeing at the time was like, right, Ben, great, you know, I can work with you now. We can make some progress. And we did. And then we started making progress because I was actually laying it all on the table. Getting to that point was really hard work. And talking to a friend recently who's going through frustrations of finding a connection with therapy as well. I'm sort of like, it's a bit of trial and error, but you've got to be honest with yourself and trust that you know, by sharing, you're going to make some progress, I suppose. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, I've had plenty of counselling in my time too, and to me sometimes it's felt a bit like first dates, you know, and you're like, you just go and you're like, oh, this isn't clicking, and that's all right. Like, it's no one's fault. It just might be that it's so dependent on the relationship, isn't it, that you have, that you can trust people and be honest, that you need that to be the right feeling for you. So I guess the recommendation would be, like, if it doesn't feel great the first time you go, like, don't give up. It's worth pursuing, isn't it? And
absolutely worth pursuing. Yeah, I mean, I said to the therapy, the group therapy that I was doing at the hospital with a group of amazing people, said I'm addicted now to group therapy. Like, you know, that it just seems to be so fulfilling and helpful in my recovery. So it's really it's been, I feel lucky that I've been able to find that and to help me now.
Yeah,
things in life. Yeah,
absolutely. I always think it's just one of the sanest things you can do is go and speak to a therapist, go and speak to a counsellor. It's just a really good sort of self-care. Doesn't mean that you're sort of not coping, or, I mean, if you feel you're not coping, and that might be something you can talk about, but it's, you know, we need to take away the stigma from seeking support for mental health, because it's a really sane, loving thing to do for yourself, I think. I just wanted to read a comment, which isn't a question as such, but just someone wanted to kind of, I think, identify with you a bit. It says, I'm 25 and have been diagnosed with non-Hodgkin marginal zone lymphoma this March, right in the midst of this event. So just sort of identifying there's someone else out there. Yeah. And I hope this session for you has been helpful to hear about Ben's experience with this. So I thought, just before we finish off, I know that sometimes if you wanted to look for help, it can all feel a little bit overwhelming, and there's just not any kind of clear ideas of where to go or where to look and what's available, really. So I'm just going to talk through some things. What I will do, I'm just going to put this in there so that you can see that, but I'll also put my email in the chat, because if you have any questions about any of this, do drop me an email, because I can point you in the right direction. So initially, starting off, like Ben said, with the NHS, there is stuff available on the NHS. It is possible. Some departments have oncopsychologists. And I mean, they're brilliant because obviously they're really experienced in talking to people who've been through cancer treatment. Sadly, as with most things in the NHS, this isn't available everywhere and it's quite limited and there are long waiting lists. So the reality of that is, I don't want to sort of build your hopes up and think that you'll be able to see someone like that straight away. But the point is, it's worth asking. Ask your clinicians, ask your nurses. They should be aware of what's available where you're being treated. If the NHS is not proving easy to access or navigate, there are many charities that also offer free counselling, and it often is a 6-week course or something like that, but it's a great way to kind of get a feel for what it's like and to try it out and just see if it's something that might help you. So places like Maggie's, I don't know if you know Maggie's centres, they're around the country. They're places that are attached to big hospitals and they're centres for people going through cancer treatment, and they are, in my opinion, just wonderful. So it's really worth, they offer counselling in those, in the centres. So it's really worth going in and asking those if you've got one nearby. If you haven't, or I mean, in addition, Macmillan also do offer counselling. They can offer 6 weeks of counselling as well. They also have online support available for you. Obviously, more specifically, like Ben was talking about, if it's if you're related to anything to do with alcohol and addiction, you've got AA and NA available. Again, I can point you in the direction if you want to talk about any of that more confidentially, if that would. Yeah, do drop me a line because I can point you in the right direction for those. If you have resources to get private counselling, which tends to be, obviously, it's more expensive than free counselling by very nature, you can look, I've put there in the chat, the counselling directory is a great place to start, because that is a place where every counsellor on there is accredited to the professional body. So there are counsellors surprisingly don't have to be accredited. You can be a counsellor without having any professional regulation, but everyone on this directory does. So it's a good place to start for people who you know are reliable and are vetted and they're you know, with a regulatory body. On that site you can search. So you can search for things like people who are specialised in talking to people with cancer or health issues. You could look for depression and anxiety. So you can search for people who specialise in what you want to talk about. And I just want to flag there as well, there are low-cost counsellors available. So on that site, there will be people who offer low-cost counselling for people who are struggling financially or on benefits. It's also worth just Googling low-cost counselling centres local to you, because what counsellors have to do is they're kind of in training for quite some time and they have to see so many clients over time. And so when they're trying to get those hours, they often offer really good value, low-cost counselling. And they're all supervised so that, you know, technically you're sort of being seen by 2 people at once. So that's a great way. That's a great kind of loophole to get through. I also just want to flag our program, Shine. We run, as Ben was saying, the breakout program and the circles program are both 6-week programs online where you just meet for 2 hours once a week with a group of people going through something similar to you, a group of people who will just get it. They're facilitated sessions. And we talk about some of the issues that are really kind of that come up, that the more holistic experience of going through cancer. So less of the medical stuff and more about things like living with uncertainty, grief and loss, processing some of those feelings that Ben was talking about. I have to flag, obviously, we're not therapists, we're not counsellors, but it is a group where you can really share what you're going through. And we do have counsellors attached to the programme who we can refer you to. So that's an alternative. All the details of that are on our website, and the next programmes are starting in January. So they're open to apply for now. So if you're interested again, do drop me an email or go and look on the website and apply directly. I've just got a chat thing in the chat saying if you have an incurable diagnosis, that often will offer you a reduced rate counselling in the private sector too. So yeah, it's definitely mentioning what you're going through when you approach anyone. Thank you for that. That's a really good point. And finally, before we finish, I just wanted to flag a session that we're running on Wednesday evening between 7 and 8 with a trauma therapist, and I hope I say her name right, it's Cristina Garcia Liavona. She works with private clients and at the Priory and specialises in trauma therapy, EMDR, which eye movement desensitization. Oh, I don't know what the R stands for. I'll have to learn that. But she's running a session on Wednesday all about cancer treatment and trauma, and how to identify whether some of what you're feeling might actually be a trauma response, and how you might handle that differently to sort of other things you're going through. So I just wanted to flag, because that might be some of interest to some of you if what we've talked about today has spoken to you a bit. So if you've got any more questions, do put them in the chat. I'm sure happy to chat for a little minute more, but I'm going to stop the recording, and thank you so much, Ben, for sharing.
Pleasure, Claire. Yeah. Thanks so much, and thanks everyone for listening, and hopefully you've been able to take a few things away today. Good luck with your journey.
Thank you so much.